Hey, it's Kevin with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be talking to Bob Hutson, and he is the Senior Vice President of Supply Chain and Real Estate at the Beacon Group. And we're going to talk a little bit about how he's come into the Beacon Group and brought together this real estate division and what that means. And we're also going to talk a little bit about specifically getting into warehouse network optimization and how they do that with software that they have, and also what that means for you and why you should do one. So definitely looking forward to diving into this discussion, because I think that real estate, to have a warehouse, we need some real estate. But I think it's a hot topic because we're not seeing much relief, at least in the market, and we'll get a little update on that too from Bob as well. So, Bob, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you, Kevin.
Good to have you on, and it's great to get you on and talk about this topic, because I think it is one that's certainly important and is a must, right, in the warehousing industry, because we are all about real estate to store those boxes, right? But for people that are not familiar with the Beacon Group, why don't you give us kind of a brief overview of what it is you all do?
Well, the Beacon Group has grown quite a bit in its capabilities in the last few years.
Mm-hmm.
We can basically take a company through conceptual design of their networks and supply chains all the way through implementation, including racking the facility, putting in automation, and turning the key. We can even put folks inside the buildings and help them with startup and to provide resources and that kind of thing. So it's a full turnkey, not just consultative like you see in a lot of situations. We offer that, and that's obviously important up front. But we also can get in and help you kick the tires and turn the wheels of operations and make them happen. So that's what really attracted me to the Beacon Group, and selling Sumedian Technologies and the Foresight software to the Beacon Group 3 years ago was that ability for us to provide it all. Right, it's very rare to see a company be able to come in and do that start to finish. So I thought that was a very interesting concept George came up with, and I'm glad to be a part of it. Here we are, 3 years into it. We've invested a lot of money into the programs as well during that time when I was ready to really retire. I'm nowhere near ready to retire now. We're having a lot of fun. So
That's good. That's good. So tell us a little bit about that, because this full real estate division is recently launched, right? So
that's correct.
so tell us a little bit about the story behind it. 'Cause it sounds like you had a software, you're ready to retire. Now
Yeah,
you're not ready to retire. So tell us a little bit about how that kind of came about and how this all rolled out.
right, right. Well, I was in the commercial real estate business back in the year 2000 through 2000.
Mm,
Well, I was all through some media, and so through 2023, and was one of the top producing industrial brokers at CB Richard Ellis. So
mm,
I brought that whole real estate background into Beacon, and we felt like while Beacon was very good in the front end of it, we'd walk away with when the big transactions were ready to occur, and really the
mm,
customers needed more service beyond just that. What was happening in the beginning stages of consulting and laying out a rack, we were often too late to get in the conceptual stages. So we we obviously
interesting.
now have the ability to get in there up front and conceptualize with the customer and model and optimize whatever it is necessary. And that's pretty much everything involved in the business. A lot of people think supply chain optimization is just about optimizing warehouses. It's a lot more than
Mm,
that. It's involved in
yeah.
cash flows and ROIs and a lot of financial implications to these decisions. It involves all the real estate transaction, it involves transportation costs, inventory levels. It is so much involved into it that getting in up front help these customers from the start when they're just beginning to think about what they're going to do is extremely valuable.
Mm,
And it is it's needed where a lot of companies don't think it is. They think they know what they need. They find me a warehouse in Omaha, Nebraska. I need 100,000 square feet in Omaha, Nebraska, but
sure.
there's really no thought that goes into that. So what was so attractive to me in bringing Foresight technology in here and investing more into it to make it even better was the ability to come in and provide the whole development of the conceptual design of the network all the way through turnkey and turn it over to a customer to run it. And
Mm,
that's owning it. We call it owning it. We own it with you, right? So that's kind of our strategy now, and it's working.
mm. Very interesting, yeah, and very smart approach to it as well. And I'm curious, like, so you mentioned that oftentimes you were losing the opportunity because it was too late because you weren't involved in the real estate side. It sounded like so.
Right,
Uh,
right.
and why is that? Is that because they were dealing with a broker that was referring them to somebody else, or like how? What is the reason for that?
Well, Beacon would come in after the decision to make the warehouse happen. They come in after we need the rack. We need help with our layout. We need help with engineering. So Beacon wasn't really upfront in the beginning conceptual stages of that, right? So they
Okay.
were never called upon to do that. And George saw that as a missing aspect of his business, and I think he's absolutely right. And he saw what I
Mm,
was doing at Samedian, which was getting in on that front end, conducting the real estate transactions, and then I was leaving the back end off. So it was a great
mm.
marriage for us to get the front end and the back end working together, and that was the whole idea behind the strategy.
Got it. Okay, and that makes a ton of sense, definitely. So now tell us a little bit about kind of this warehouse network optimization analysis. I guess first let's just say like what is a warehouse network optimization analysis?
It's I've heard a lot of definitions for this one,
I'm
but
sure.
and there are a lot of definitions depending on the company, depending on the situation. That study may look completely different in one company versus another, right? But basically, it's a process that analyzes the structure and the performance of a company's supply chain with the intention to optimize efficiency and effectiveness, right? So
Mm,
that's basically what this is. It can be a very simple process that can be a few weeks long for a smaller company, or it can go into a deep dive, we call them, in a larger company, and sometimes smaller companies require a deeper dive. So there's a broad range of what this can look like, and in the years past, it was always thought that a network optimization study, oh my gosh, that's going to take 6 months. It's license all this expensive
mm,
software, have engineers to run it. It's not like that anymore. With all the new
mm,
technology that's out there, machine learning, and all the things we've got in our programs, it allows us to do these things in a very short period of time. In some cases, sometimes smaller companies within a few weeks, we can have really clear answers to where they need to go without spending a
mm,
ton of money and time to do it. So it's a misconception for the most part. So what's really exciting is a smaller company, especially privately held companies, can really benefit from this, right? And that having the ability to do something like the bigger companies were doing for years, now the smaller companies can do it at a much lower cost and much less resource savvy.
mm. Interesting. Yeah, yeah. I think it's very interesting because, and I guess for perspective, because you're talking about small companies and large companies as well. Do you think everybody needs to do a warehouse network optimization analysis, or like what if not? When is the
Yeah,
point that you
that's a good
should
question.
consider
You know
doing that?
what? I've rarely found a perfect world strategy already in implementation. I don't think I've
Mm,
ever found one. So, to answer your question, it's likely that every company has opportunities to improve, right?
mm,
Their network. And again, it can be something very simple to benchmarking. That's one of the byproducts of what we do early on. You think an optimization study is expensive, but it's really not. And then you get in and start benchmarking rates when you get the initial data dump. You start benchmark that against other companies within the region and of similar size, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, we can save 10 to 15% in the first 2-3 weeks of the study, right?
mm,
So it's people don't understand that oh, this is expensive. It's really not. The
mm.
ROI can be tremendous within a few week payback. In fact, we've done a few projects recently where it paid for the entire study. It was hardly any cash out of pocket to a customer to do these things. So it's a
Oh wow.
whole new world out there that I think a lot of C suites need to understand better. A lot of C suites don't understand supply chain as well as they should, and
Yeah.
they understand finance, and that's usually a big disconnect between the financial decision and the operational decision. A lot of time what operations seems to think is the right way to go is presented to the board or the C-suite. C-suite comes back, wait a minute, that doesn't reach our hurdle rate. Their ROI is not good enough. because
Mm,
operation really doesn't understand the financial implications, and the financial C-suite really don't understand operations. So what this technology does, and what our approach does, is it brings this all together so we can have a
mm,
vision of what this looks like together, right? Operation needs to fully understand the financial hurdles and goals that need to be achieved for the board and the C-suite, and the C-suite needs to understand what operation needs to achieve. So when you put those two together in a model, now you're not backing up at the end and say, wait a minute, we didn't think about that, right? We didn't think
mm,
about the hurdle. We didn't think we needed to hit a 20% IRR, for example,
mm,
right? So that can be that alone helps companies, make the decision to begin with. Because if they can't make the decision, it comes back rejected. It never gets implemented. But it's a
mm,
good strategy, but it can't get implemented because it didn't meet certain financial objectives.
mm. Interesting, interesting. So so there's a bit of a trade off there almost, right? So
Oh yeah.
because you're
Oh,
saying kind of
there
this,
is. There are
it's not hitting
compromises.
financial, but supply chain optimization might be a little different, right?
Yeah, there are definitely compromises on both sides. But what's nice
Mm,
about the new modeling today is, we can put all the factors in and still achieve a cash flow objective. Like I see a lot of these strategies getting kicked back because of cash flow. Even right, it may be a perfect world scenario, may increase profit by 40%, but it
mm,
costs too much to do it. It's too complex. It's too resource sappy. Right.
mm,
So what we like to do in these analysis go into, I will call, the real world. And it's okay. In the real world, we only have so much cash to spend. In the real world,
mm,
we only have so many resources to implement this strategy. So in our models, we're able to build and develop these scenarios around those constraints. And that allows us to come up with what we call a perfect world strategy, which may be a compromise between the financial objectives and the operational objectives. But at the end, it's the right scenario at the right time at the right price.
mm. Interesting, interesting. Yeah, and I think it is. It's a very interesting point you have there that there's not enough supply chain perspective in the C-suite.
No way.
I think we're seeing an increase there, right?
We
But it
are.
certainly needs to be more as we see that the supply chain. I mean, it's always been critical, right? But it's becoming even more critical, especially with e-commerce and how consumer behaviors has shifted and all those different things.
It really got
So
into vogue during COVID, right? Everybody learned
yeah,
it. Like it was a household word during COVID. But
yeah,
still, they're not. No one, most C-suite executives outside of supply chain officers, right, really
hmm,
understand the depth and magnitude of supply chain has on the business. I mean, it can affect sales. It can dramatically
mm,
affect sales, right? And we'll factor that into our models as well as some. I don't see a lot of other companies really doing. It has far-reaching implications in the business and can affect you in almost every area of the business. When you move a network or change a supply chain, that's going to affect the entire business.
mm, yeah,
It can be dangerous too. That's why it's so important to have a really good pilot behind the technology that you're using to optimize that supply chain. You got to have very experienced people that have been in the real world for a long time that know how to do this, right? To
mm,
avoid mistakes. It's not a push button answer. Never has been. A lot of folks think it is a push button. It's a black box solution. It's not. It's
yeah.
it's a derived solution using technology and human intuition and intelligence to come up with the right answer.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I think that's a great points there. So let's talk a little bit about what does kind of network optimization look like these days, right? Because there's a lot of talk for a while around getting your facilities closer to the consumer, but I think that's maybe died down a little bit. So how do you see now companies thinking about, and through your analysis too? I mean, uh, what are your thoughts on like how people should be thinking about the placement of their, whether it's fulfillment centers, warehouses, or distribution centers now?
I have one word for you on that, and I'll elaborate on that one word. But
Sure.
holistically, they
Mm,
need to be looking at their network holistically. That is all the elements of supply chain: inventory, transportation, real estate, taxes, incentives, labor cost and quality, effect on service levels and days to service, effect on sales. All of these things have to go into the mix to make a good decision,
Mm.
right? So today, I think companies, they'll say, well, we need to be with one day travel time to all customers. That's our goal, right? Well, that's a very simplified goal. We could go to 5 DCs and make that happen. But now, if we go from 3 to 5 DCs to make that happen, we're going to increase our safety stocks. We may save a little in transportation, but not always. I've
Mm.
seen 2 and 3 DCs outperform transportation costs 4 or 5 DCs if they're well placed,
Yeah.
right? And
Interesting.
well placed doesn't necessarily mean the shortest distance. I can show you examples actually of and LTL is a great example. Any company that's shipping out LTL,
Mm.
rate structures in Zarlite, Mars, and all these other tariffs that are used are very, very different region to region. So, you may say a Northeast DC is where our center of gravity is, shortest distance all customers for the Northeast population, but the lowest cost may be down in North Carolina. It,
Mm.
it is a very strange, counterintuitive thing. Then you have to start factoring in, okay, well, are there qualified people there to run this operation, right?
Yeah, that's
And what are
huge.
the taxes like? Is inventory tax there versus Pennsylvania, for example? All
Mm.
of those things need to go into the model. So when you ask that question, what do companies need to be thinking about? They need to be thinking about all of that. Now,
Mm.
one of the problems companies have, Kevin, is tying all this together. And there's no one in the company that's an expert in all these areas. It's a different
Yeah.
trans expert. It's a different real estate expert. It's a different tax expert. It's a different, right?
Mm.
All these different experts, but none of them really talk to each other much, right? And I think that is what
Yeah.
we come in for, because we've seen all that. We can touch all these points and bring it all together in one model, so the company has a full understanding of all the implications for that decision. And I'll tell you, I've been doing this for over 40 years,
Mm.
and I'm always surprised at the answer. It has
Yeah.
never failed. And I think I know it all, right? I've been around the block so many times. And every single time we do one of these, it surprises me. The answer surprises me. So if it says a lot, because it's only seen as many of these studies as I have, which is probably over 1,000 of them in my career.
Mm.
Um, and to be able to still say that, ought to shine some light on, for people who have not done one of these before, or a handful of these before, what they might expect to see. It's going to be a surprise. 100% of the time.
That's really, really interesting, and really interesting too. That it's still a surprise to you as well,
Yeah,
as deep as you've been in this,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
I'm curious there. I mean, can you give us like an example of one that was like a total shock to the company that was doing an analysis, like they thought like maybe this is going to be the best location, and they were like way off.
As a company, several of them that come to mind. Um, uh, One just swore they're going to stay in Denver.
Yeah.
Every aspect pointed to Denver, and ended up being Chicago.
Wow,
you know,
that's very different. Yeah.
Another one was in Chicago, and they wanted to, relocate south, and
Mm.
they were thinking, Tennessee area, end up being Texas, and end up
Mm.
dragging in a whole showroom. It got beyond the warehouse. So all of a sudden, we started getting conceptual design of this whole re-engineering of the layout. Well, what if we had a showroom there with it, right? And so it
Mm.
opened up Pandora's box of opportunities, right? So when we look at these things, that often happens as well. It opens up other doors of opportunity to improve. Not just a warehouse, maybe a showroom, maybe something to help sales, right? Maybe it's a service line, a call center, even could be close to the distribution center, might have some lucrative advantages, right? So when you start opening all the doors and kicking all the tires, you'd be surprised what ends up coming out the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That is quite the contrast to what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah,
That's very
and then,
interesting.
then you
So,
go, yeah, and then you could go down the other side where companies have a tendency to want to check boxes. Oh, my lease is
mm.
expiring in 8 months, 9 months. We got to either renew or find another. And so they call their broker. They go out and kick the tires on rates, and they end up getting that box checked. They either renew or they
Mm,
move down the street, right? And it's a shame because if they really took maybe a 3 to 4 week look at this in an
mm,
optimization, from an optimization perspective, you may find, man, it may be better to hold over or maybe extend the lease for a year and let's build a new warehouse in a completely different location and create a perfect world scenario for ourselves. But
mm,
because they're so backed in a corner by that lease expiration, they haven't been out in front of it. That's another thing we like to help customers through as well, as conceptually understanding time, right? Oh, that lease expires in 8 months. You're out of time. You can't do much about that. But if we're out
yeah.
in front of it a couple of years, and when we put in our net model, for example, put all the buildings in that net model, we're tracking all this stuff and all the critical dates well in advance. So we can start talking about that lease expiration 2 years in advance, give us an opportunity to do something that might improve that location. So it's not
Mm,
just an instant of consulting that we're going to optimize your supply chain. The right way to do it is an ongoing look at what's going on in your organization and try to improve it as you go with a long-term vision of what to
mm,
do next, not these in the box, I got to get it done in 8 months strategy. And companies leave a lot of money on the table. They leave a lot of good strategy on the table by taking that approach. Foresight's the name of our application for a reason, right?
yeah.
Have foresight to
I
see
get it now. Yeah.
to see what's coming, right? And if you, the more foresight you have, the smarter you are, and the more you can
Mm,
do about it. I see so many companies backing into these corners, and it's kind of frustrating. We had one recently that had that, that they had to get that lease done, they had to do it, and the right solution would have been, probably a build a suit, right, and in
mm,
a different location that would have been a much better strategy in the long term, for that company. So uh, that's one of the biggest things I see in companies. They're
mm.
reactive to these lease expirations, reactive to what needs to be done next. Need to check these boxes. I got to get these done. Versus out in front of it a good bit to make a difference in the long term health of the organization.
Yeah, yeah, and that makes a ton of sense because it is, you think about what goes into moving operations too, and that's a whole other thing,
And
and
that
that's
that
a
scares
long term prep, yeah, to do it right.
and that scares them too, right? The
Mm,
resources it's going to take, which is what excites me about the Beacon Group. We know we can get
mm,
in that building with you. We've had some of our BPs go into the operations and start running them for them for the first 4 or 5 months to make sure
mm.
it goes well. We call it owning it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's important, right? Because a lot of companies are very scared of these implementations and startups. We call them the startup fear, right?
Mm,
They're hard, and so they're reluctant to do it because of the difficulty of implementation. But
mm.
it doesn't have to be.
Interesting.
You can rely on the expert to help you through that, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, so you mentioned in there a little earlier some of the kind of data points, like what is the taxes like on inventory, labor, and things like that. But I'm curious, like, what is the one data factor, data point that you see is most often overlooked or not considered when thinking about where these facilities should be located?
Yeah, it's a great question, Kevin. I think one of the biggest ones is cash flow. What the company wants to do operationally versus how much capital do they have to implement that strategy. And unless there's an early uh, discussion and justification for the capital budget necessary to implement a strategy, um, you could be destined to being turned down at the end. You spend all this time and money on a strategy and then not have the ROI or the hurdle. We call it the hurdle rate
Mm,
to achieve it. That's one. Um, you know, we also see, you know, the disconnect. Again, we talked about it before, but the disconnect between what operations thinks they need and what the board of directors and the C-suite can afford, if you will.
sure.
And that
Yeah.
there that is an absolute problem and because they don't speak the same languages. If
Mm.
the operations down at the warehouse level very rarely get to speak to a board member or a C-suite executive about what is on the other company's agenda. There are all these secretive things going on in the corporate world that could prevent us from. And I've seen that. I've seen studies go underway, and come to find out, the company is in the process of a acquisition,
Yeah.
and that throws a wrench in the whole optimization program. But they've spent 4 or 5 months in
Mm.
an optimization study without the knowledge that there's an acquisition underway which was to be kept secret, right?
Yeah.
So those kind of things we see, again, uh, the checking the boxes of real estate, and lease renewals. That's a big oversight, I think. The other is, as it goes back to the financials too, is the internal rate of return and of that whole project. And this is measuring those cash flows in and those cash flows out. What we model and like to model is how much cash is going out in the beginning for the study, for moving, for new material handling equipment, deposit on the new warehouse. All these things got to go in that model. And then uh, compiling that into a model gives us both an operational perspective of what we're trying to achieve from a customer service standpoint, inventory level
Yeah.
standpoint, and juxtapose that against a financial aspect of
Mm.
it. And that is huge missing link in these studies. And I like to have very early conversations on with the CEOs and CFOs of the companies we work for right up front, because we need to know that right up front, because there's no sense in spending time developing strategies that are capital intensive if the company has no intention of spending that cash on
Mm.
it,
Yeah.
right? Another one is inventory. I go back to, okay, adding warehouses, we're getting close to customer all within one day. Well, every DC you add is going to increase safety stocks.
Sure.
Well,
Yeah.
most companies finance their inventory. Well, you're going to borrow how much money to finance that safety stock that's going into those new warehouses?
Mm.
And we call it square root law of inventory. It's a basic way of determining approximately how much safety stock will increase as you add additional buildings to your network, right? So we like to model that. So, okay, you're going to add 2 DC, you go 3 to 5. Well, your inventory cost at a 7% cost of money could be millions.
Mm.
And that's not factored into that decision. They're looking at transportation days to service, but oftentimes not understanding the financial implications of inventory.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a huge one too, because there's like I said in the beginning, right? I mean, was so much talk about, especially from an e-commerce perspective, like get closer to the customer, have multi nodes and all these things, but you need much more inventory to be able to do that, and then you got to manage that inventory too, which is a
Yeah,
whole other thing
people. That's
from like a
additional,
cost
right?
perspective.
You got
Yeah.
additional GMs, operations manager run the 2 DCs. You start putting all that in there, and you can see how easily the CFO would go, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We're going to
It's
hire
going to
how
cost a lot
many
of money.
people? We're going to do what? We're going to do what? All to get our days of service from 1.4 to 1 day? Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yeah.
But sales has
Definitely.
said they need 1 day service, right?
Yeah.
Sales has said we need 1 day service, and that's it. Then it gets to the top, and they go, oh, wait a minute. It's going to cost us how many $1 million to do this?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
one of
Absolutely.
the,
So
yeah.
yeah. So we kind of talked about some of the network optimization stuff and how you kind of leverage that and go into that smartly, right? And what some of the results can be. But if we look to the future kind of where warehouse networks are going to be and what that's going to look like, how do you think that will look like? What do you see in the next few years? Because it seems like the lease rates and things like that, there's not much relief happening there, right? From what I'm seeing at least and hearing. But what does the next few years look like, and how can a company maybe think ahead, like you were talking about earlier, to prepare for some of these changes if there will be drastic changes in what a warehouse network looks like?
That's a great question, Kevin. You know, the economy. and the world of supply chain very dynamic. It changes. Look at the tariffs now.
Hmm.
It's thrown a monkey wrench in so many companies'
Oh yeah.
these plans. And who anticipated that? There's no model in the world could have anticipated these tariffs and what implications they were going to have. We're working with a client right now. It's just getting destroyed with these tariffs. You know,
Mm.
they're over in Kazakhstan right now trying to
Yeah.
find other sources, right? Because the China, the 100% tariff on China is just not going to cut it. They can't
Yeah.
exist with that kind of tariff. So there are some very dynamic things that are going on. As far as future supply chain goes, I would advise companies to take a longer term approach. You know, many companies are very short term, myopic. They
Mm.
see what's coming down the road, maybe 2 or 3 months or month to month P&L management. This is the mode they're in, firefighting, right? Day to day operations. You know, you almost need to think like a long term corporate ninja, you know, and
Mm.
thinking about where the company's going to be in the next 4 to 5 years and have more resources, and it can be external resources that are helping build that strategy for the long haul to help you anticipate things a little better, right? Get out in front of lease expirations, get out in front of service disruptions, get out in front of contingency planning. What happens if you're in one DC and a tornado hits it?
Yeah.
Right? What are you going to do? You're almost out of business. We've done contingency planning where we'll split that into two warehouses, and we'll look at risk mitigation. What's the weather like? Fire, wildfires, earthquakes, all these kind of things. If you have your say you're a pharmaceutical company and you've got $1 billion worth of inventory in one building, and that gets hit by lightning, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you've got a
Not
major
good.
problem. And a lot of companies are not thinking like that. They're not thinking proactively about the future and how to build and insulate themselves from these kind of failures and these catastrophes. But the more out in front you are, the more you work with companies like ours to help you get out in front of that on an ongoing basis, not just the one-time optimization, but thinking through this holistically, like I said in the very beginning, and for the long haul, you're going to avoid a lot of problems, and your supply chain can be a lot more effective and flexible to deal with these dynamic changes that are happening in the economy.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, and those are really, really great insights there. And I think it's a super interesting point about, the like natural disasters and things like that, or just weather in general. I mean, it makes me think back. I don't know if it was last year, or maybe the year before. There was I think it was a Dollar Tree distribution center got destroyed by a tornado or something like that,
Yeah.
and you can see from the pictures just tons of inventory just
Yeah. Oh,
destroyed
oh,
basically.
yeah.
So yeah,
And how much
very.
did that cost them, right?
Oh yeah, I'm sure a lot. Yeah, yeah.
Sales. I
Not
mean,
only.
sales revenue, not just the loss of that inventory, but
Yeah.
it costs a lot. And to have these kind of contingency plans in place, I think is important. That's all. I think that's all part of optimization. See, I
Mm,
think all that is part of network optimization. Remember, I tell you there's a broad range from the beginning of what a supply chain network optimization
yeah.
looks like. There's one that's ongoing and very smart and very anticipating, and then there are those that are just rush to judgment, have to get it done, check the box, right?
Mm,
So depending on what realm we're in, we have to react in that realm. We can't fix the uncontrollables, right? But if you get out in
very
front of
true.
it
Yeah.
enough, you can control it. And I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
my
One hundred
best
percent.
advice to senior management is that be think from a supply chain perspective, be thinking longer term about it and have a partner that can help you anticipate these things and get out in front of these things well in advance of having a problem.
Yeah. Fantastic tip there, and I think that's a great point to end on. And I really appreciate you coming on the show and talking about this. I think it's very interesting to hear some of the call it intricacies in what goes into this that people often overlook, as you pointed out with some examples in the conversation today. But if people are looking for that partner to help them and are interested in learning more about the Beacon Group, what's the best way to learn more or get in touch?
Well, our website is a good place to start, tbgintl.com. A lot on foresight there and all the other services we provide. And that's probably the best way to start.
All right, fantastic. And we'll definitely put that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well as in the show notes so people can easily find it. So, Bob, thank you once again for your time on the show today.
Kevin, thank you. Great questions today.
Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning into today's video here on our YouTube channel, The New Warehouse Podcast, and I appreciate you tuning in. If you liked what you saw, make sure you subscribe to our channel, and if you like this video in particular, make sure you like it as well. And if you want to get this great t-shirt that you see in the video behind me, Warehouses Are Sexy, head to warehousesAreSexy.com and get your own.